Hi, everyone. Welcome. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I feel like with everything going on with Zoom, we just have to go with the flow. So thank you for being here. Truly appreciate it. And welcome to our very first virtual Denver Startup Week. My name is Olivia Omega. I'm your founder track chair, and I'm also on the Denver Startup Week organizing committee. If 2020's taught us anything, and these little glitches have taught us anything, it's that we're more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. Denver Startup Week at Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, where they can learn and also grow regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, and the combination of those identities. So again, thank you for coming. We're really excited about this session and overall about our Stronger Together Women of Denver Startup Week series. This is the last of 3 that happened this week. So hopefully you were able to catch the previous ones and are here. Thank you again and joining us as we wrap up this great series. I am going to go ahead and kick it off to Laura. If you want to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Thank you so much. We have Laura here just to talk briefly about our amazing sponsors that make this session possible.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Ruffin, and I'm one of the lead software engineers at Promontory Mortgage Path. And I'm very excited to be able to welcome you to this session as a sponsor of the Stronger Together Women of Denver Startup Week series. For those of you who don't know us, Promontory Mortgage Path is Denver-based fintech startup on a mission to fundamentally change the way community lenders approach their mortgage business. We're a fast-growing team of problem solvers, and we're leveraging tech to engineer a faster, simpler, more inclusive mortgage process. Our team is driven by a shared desire to make change, and our collaborative environment is rooted in transparency and continuous self-improvement. We've been really lucky enough to continue to grow during this uncertain time. So if you are seeking an environment dedicated to your personal and professional success and growth, and one where you can have a real and lasting impact, I encourage you to stop by our virtual booth at the job fair. We're very grateful for the opportunity to partner with Denver Startup Week to support Denver's connected and diverse entrepreneurship ecosystem, and we're especially proud to support the Stronger Together Women of Denver Startup Week series. Promontory Mortgage Path firmly believes advocating for women in entrepreneurship and business in general is critical. Gaining inspiration from women who have forged the path, like our upcoming speaker, Nicole, Glaros, is important as we continue to support women in leadership. And with this, let's welcome Nicole and enjoy the session.
Thanks so much, Laura. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Promontory Mortgage for supporting us and Denver Startup Week for putting on this great event. My name is Nicole Glaros, and I am the Chief Investment Strategy Officer at Techstars, which is a local accelerator and entrepreneurial platform that helps support entrepreneurs. And I've got a little deck, so give me a second. Let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. I have been working with entrepreneurs and with startups for probably close to, well, I think it's like 18 years now, as you can tell by all of my gray hair. And one of the things that I really focus on with companies that I work with is the founder issues. While I am an investor and I have been investing in companies for close to 2 decades, I will tell you that of the companies that I work with, over half of them will break up. And I don't want you guys to be that company. I want to help give you tools that allow you to sustain through that. In fact, there was a great study that came out of Harvard by a professor by the name of Noam Wasserman that showed that 65% of all startups fail because of people issues, not because of product or market issues, not because of funding issues, but because of people issues. When you recognize that over 65% of startups fail because of those founder issues, and yet you think about the resources that you as a founder are putting into your marketing budget and your product development, and how much resources you're putting into your founder issues and your people issues, you can start to see why this is such a bad trend. So I'm going to give you 9 steps today to help you not fail because of this issue, because of this very large issue. All right, so step one is very simply just understanding your odds. When you understand that 65%, that you have a 65% likelihood of death because of having conflicts with your co-founder, when you start to understand that, you will start to build scaffolding and support to help you not be that company. Just start with the assumption that you are not the exception to this rule. One of the beautiful things of working with startups that I've found over the years is that all entrepreneurs believe that they are the exception to the statistic. In this case, don't believe that. In this case, if you believe that you are the rule rather than the exception, you will help build that scaffolding to help make sure that this isn't something that will kill your company. All right, so step two is to simply get your legals in order, get your docs in order, right? Do you have an agreement with your founders? Do you guys have founder agreements in place? Do you have vesting in place? I am so surprised to this day to still see companies and founders that get together that don't have vesting in place. And you know what? In 1 or 2 years, when it's not working out for one of the founders and they leave with half or a third of the business, it makes that business not only unfundable, but it doesn't help you can't bring on the talent that you need in the company to help grow the company to the next step. And so the company ends up dying. One of the things that I always like to talk to my founders about is what those vesting schedules look like. The average company takes somewhere between 7 to 10 years to get some sort of liquidity or exit, but yet the average vesting schedule is only 4 years. And so after 4 years, if you've got a founder that walks with half of the ownership of the company, but the company isn't even through half of its life cycle yet, that is going to potentially kill the company. So consider longer vesting schedules. By the way, this helps not just the company, but it helps you as a founder, even if you're the one leaving. You think that if you walk with 50% or 30% or even 20% or 15% of the company, that you're walking with something that's valuable. But the truth is that your departure potentially is hurting the company. And unless they've got the space on the cap table to bring on additional support or bring on additional investors, the company will likely die. And that 15 or 20 or 50% of the cap table you still own is worth zero. So the best thing that you can do for the equity that you still retain is to make sure that it's a small enough amount that the company's got the resources it needs to be successful. And then the last thing is just, are there possible equity claims? While this doesn't happen often, it does happen where if you've got a person that was ideating with you in the very early days of the company and decided to not stick with it, and then the company one day is worth something, guess what? That potential founder is gonna want their fair share. If somebody was present in the early days of formation of the company, you wanna get an equity sign off from that person that says that they don't own any part of the company, or you give them a very, very small amount as part of the ideation process. Any attorney can help you with this part. This is sort of the very mechanical, very easy to get right part, and also very easy to get wrong part. So make sure that you work with an attorney to get your legal docs in order and help prevent some of these issues. All right, so step 3 is understanding yourself. This is actually probably the hardest part in all of this. You have to understand yourself at an intimate level. And there are a lot of words on the screen, and I'll walk through some of them, but a lot of these are tools as well. So first of all, you need to understand what your values are. If you don't understand what your values are, and your values are in conflict with your co-founder, it will absolutely create a conflict in a way that will break up the company. So there are guides to help you figuring out what your values are. In fact, Brene Brown does a really good job. She's got, if you go to her website, she's got a list of values. And one of the things that I have companies do is go through this whole list of values and circle the top 3 that mean something to them as founders. And when you only get to 3, and only 3, not 20, but 3, we know that these are your most important 3. And it's a great tool for you to sit down and understand what those 3 values are for you, and then compare it to what your co-founder's values are, and then talk about how those things can be in conflict or can be complementary to each other. So that provides you a really great foundation for talking about values. The second thing is understanding your why, is finding your why. When you wake up one day and you realize that you're spending your days doing something that you hate, or doing something that's misaligned with what you believe your strengths or your purpose is, you'll leave. or you'll hate it, or you'll try to swing the company in a different direction, maybe a direction that it wasn't meant to go. So starting off with your why. Simon Sinek does a great job of helping people identify their why and also helping companies identify your why. He's got an amazing book in there that I highly recommend you check out that's called Find Your Why. And when you go through that exercise and you can articulate not only what your why is or your purpose or your mission, but also the how you accomplish your mission and your purpose, and then the what, the thing that you do every single day that helps you accomplish those things. Work on that for yourself. Once you work on that for yourself, you can then work on it for your company. And then also just knowing your shadow. This is great work that came out of Tony Robbins, and he talks about the 6 needs of individuals: certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection, growth, and impact. The problem is that knowing which ones you prioritize over others and understanding the dark side of that same trait. And if you can know that about yourself, you will understand what your behaviors and what those behaviors do. So for instance, a founder that values certainty over significance versus the other founder that might value significance over certainty, there are going to be instances in the company where those two things clash, and you need to talk about them in advance so you can know how to work with them. Understanding your strengths and weaknesses is also really important too. I listed a couple tools here that are popular tools: the Strengths Finder tool, the DISC assessment, or Enneagram. These will help you understand your strengths and potentially your weaknesses. It is so important for yourself to understand what those are, specifically understanding your weaknesses. There is a big focus in personal development that says lean into your strengths. And while I totally agree with that, it's also important that you identify your weaknesses so you can build scaffolding around you. It's not so that you can improve those weaknesses, but it's so that you can build a team around you that has strengths where you are weak. If you are in denial about those weaknesses, that's where problems happen, or if you're not aware of them. And then the last thing is just knowing what your personal goals are, right? Are you going into the startup because you want a quick exit, or are you going into the startup because you see yourself in 15 years running a great big company? What is your role in that? Are you CEO of the company? Is that what your goal is? You want to be a CEO? Or do you want to just work on product all day and build something? What is your goal of pacing? Are you like an 80-hour-a-week person, or you want to be an 80-hour-a-week person with breaks in between? Or are you more of a 40-hour-a-week person? There's nothing wrong with any of those settings as long as you know what they are. What are your family goals and how will that impact your work? What are your financial needs? And separating your financial needs from your financial goals is very important, especially when you're starting a company. Go through all of these exercises. By the way, I talk about this slide in a few minutes. This slide is months worth of personal work. This is not something that you do in a single sitting. This is months of work, but you should sit down, write it down on paper, get yourself comfortable that when you look at it, you feel like it's truth and it captures who you are and what you are about, and then share it with your co-founder. One of the things that I like to talk about with founders is the notion of ontological arrogance. Ontological arrogance is that you see the world as you are. For instance, if you are a nocturnal creature and you're only awake at night, you think that the world is dark all the time, and you will believe that and you will project that onto other living things. But of course, we know that's not true because we've got a broader view of the world. Ontological arrogance will limit your ability to connect with your founder, with your co-founder, while curiosity builds bridges. And so to that end, as you've gone through this self-discovery exercise, you also then need to understand your co-founder. Understanding your co-founders is so important in this whole process. These are the exact same strategies that I put on here that I put about knowing yourself. And so if you all go through these exercises on your own to understand who you are, and you write them down and then you share them with your co-founder, you can talk about the overlaps and why those could potentially be great or damaging. By the way, strengths all at the same time, if you all have the same strengths, that's awesome from an agreement perspective, but who's tackling the weaknesses and how are you going to tackle those weaknesses? So you want to talk about the overlaps and you want to talk about the gaps and how you're going to handle those when you come across them in issues at work. The step 3 and step 4, understanding yourself and understanding your co-founders, is so important. Please don't skip it. And most founders, when they come together, they don't do any of this, right? The key is to write it down, share it with your co-founder, talk about the overlaps, and talk about the gaps. All right. Step 5 is having clear roles. It's always amazing to me that usually the idea person ends up being the CEO, but a CEO at scale is not an idea person. They can be an idea person, but they also need to have additional skills like managing a board or managing the finances of the business or planning for the future finances of the company. The idea person isn't necessarily the CEO in the long run. And so for you and your co-founders, really sit down and base roles on skill sets, not on the idea person, not unless those are your personal goals. And if those are your personal goals, then understand what the role needs to be in the future of the business and make sure that you're going to get comfortable with those responsibilities. Understanding who really makes the decisions in the company. And I mean, really, your title obviously isn't the thing that allows you the ability to make the decision. It's the power dynamic in the room. And so if you're the person that everybody else looks to, but you are not the CEO, you have to be careful about the undermining that could happen in the company based on that. When a company grows from its early days to later on, it really shifts from an egalitarian structure to a hierarchical structure. And what I mean by that is in the early days of the company, when it's just you and your co-founders, you 2 or 3 of you are sitting in the room and you guys are sharing all the ideas and the decisions together, and you're coming to decisions based very collaboratively. But as the company grows and as there are more and more people in the business and as there are more responsibilities and decision makers underneath, it becomes very hierarchical in nature. Getting comfortable with that and getting comfortable with who's making the decisions and trusting them. If you're the CEO, you need to trust your CTO to make the product decisions. You can't be in charge of those product decisions anymore. And if you disagree, who's got the final say? The final one that I see all the time is how to know when you're not succeeding in your role anymore. It is a very rare moment when a CEO, a founder CEO, steps willingly out of the company, or when they raise their hand and say, hey, I'm not the right fit anymore. Usually the person is removed against their will. That's because for founders, it's very hard to see when you have hit your ceiling. And 99.9 times out of 100, founders don't know when they hit their ceiling. There are very, very rare exceptions to that. And you could think of them probably on one hand, people like potentially Bill Gates. So how do you know when you're not succeeding in your role anymore? Talk about that with your co-founder. Talk about what metrics that you will put in place or what conversations you will have around when you know you are not succeeding. So you can raise your hand and say, okay, it's time for me to step aside. All right, step 6, talk about the elephants. If you can have conversations early, before they become issues in your company, then you can get to a place where they never become elephants. But you always need to talk about the elephants in the room. I've given you 4 books here that help foster and develop this skill set. Difficult Conversations, Crucial Conversations, Nonviolent Communication, and Radical Candor. They all basically say the same things, but will help give you the tools on how to have difficult conversations early in the life of a problem before it balloons and becomes an elephant that can no longer be dealt with. The tools that are listed in these books will help you understand that a lot of this comes from your comfort level and also your ability to listen and understand how much of an actor you are in the role of communication. But making sure that you sit down and you talk to your co-founder about something. When you say, hey, listen, I've had the thought a few times now that you don't respect my time when you show up to meetings 5 minutes late. And there might be something else going on. I'd like to talk about that because I feel disrespected when you show up to every single one of my meetings 5 minutes late. Just to have these conversations before they balloon into huge issues is how you get out of most problems. By the way, I will tell you that the techniques learned in these books are not something that are limited only to your role as a co-founder. These are techniques and tools that will help you in every single relationship in your whole entire life, whether it be with your significant other or your children or your parents or whatever other role you have. All right, step 7 is just understanding your impact. I talked a little about this earlier, but most people, what happens is that they take the victim approach. This person is doing that to me, or this person is forcing me into the situation. Don't take the victim approach. Take the actor approach. Believe that you are doing something or not doing something that's causing or contributing to the situation. If you can start from that angle, you will then really understand the impact that you are having on the situation. I'll use a very personal example. As we all know, women today are outnumbered in venture capital and are outnumbered in corporate America. And we're all taking a step forward to make that possible. But let me tell you, if I stopped for one moment and thought that my gender, that I was a victim of the situation, of the system because of my gender, I never would have gotten to where I am today. I always stop and ask myself, what am I doing or not doing that's causing me to limit my own growth? Am I not stepping up to the table? Am I not being heard? Are the words that I'm using being interpreted in a different way? What skills do I not have? Because as soon as I blame my gender on my lack of ability to grow, I'll never grow. But if I'm in charge of my own actions and I'm in charge of my own destiny and I'm the one that can change it, then you take a different approach. So with your co-founder, you always want to stop and say, what are you doing or not doing that is causing or contributing to the situation? Maybe you're creating a situation that's not being open enough where they can come talk to you. Maybe the way that you interrupt them is not letting them get their voice out. And when they snap at you, you're interpreting that as being attacked, but they're feeling like you're not hearing them. So always ask yourself what you are doing or not doing. The thing that I love about this image on this slide is because I really think that this is a two-way street. First of all, he might be paying attention to his phone, but what is she doing about it? Is she telling to him, is she saying to him, hey, if you pay attention to your phone, I feel neglected? Or is she just sitting there rolling her eyes? It is a two-way street always. The book 15 Steps of Conscious Leaders, 15 Rules of Conscious Leadership that I've listed here is a really powerful book to help you be conscious about how your actions or inactions and words or lack of words are contributing to the situation. One more final thought on this slide, which is a question that when I'm doing this live with people, I always ask. I mean, it's live now, but when I'm doing it in person with people, I always ask them, I say, why do you answer the phone? And people are like, what do you mean, why do I answer the phone? I answer the phone because it's ringing. And my response to that is no, you answer the phone because at that moment in time, you deem that answering the phone is more important than whatever it is, whatever other thing that you're doing at the moment. When you understand that you are responding to stimuli and you can decide whether or not to respond to stimuli, like a phone ringing, when you can put some space in between your stimulus and response. For instance, if your co-founder is yelling at you, you could yell back, or you could take a deep breath and say, hey, what's going on that you feel the need to yell? Putting that space in between stimulus and response is so important to understanding your impact and how your impact is what your impact is having on the situation. All right, step 8. Trust is paramount. You cannot experience mutual trust and respect and connection while relating dishonestly. If you are being dishonest with yourself or with your co-founder, absolutely they are being dishonest with you. It is a two-way street. Brené Brown has a great tool called the Braving Inventory to help figure out if this is something, if you are being honest or not. And these rules are, so braving stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, generosity. And then I added one called truth. Boundaries is, are you setting boundaries? Have you set boundaries with your co-founder? And are you respecting their boundaries? Do you know what their boundaries even are? Have you asked? Reliability is simply doing what you say you're going to do, following through on the things that you commit to and doing them. Accountability is just that, owning your mistakes, apologizing, not blaming others for them, following through, right? And communicating that. Vault is not sharing information that is not yours to share. That's different than confidential information, right? Vault is when somebody confides in you some information or some personal information that you then share that's not yours. So making sure that you're not sharing information that is not yours to share. Integrity is simply living your values and doing what's right. When you have stated your values in the earlier exercise, and then you live those values, and then you're holding yourself accountable when you have not lived those values and you learn from them, that is integrity. Non-judgment is allowing people to share emotions with you without you judging them back for it. Generosity is extending the most generous interpretation of somebody's words or actions. If we jump to conclusions about their needs and those conclusions are negative, this is not generous. Let's start with the angle that everybody has best intentions in mind. And when you start with that angle of generosity, it's much easier to work through challenges. And then the last one is simply truth, right? Are you being truthful with a person? Are you being truthful with yourself? By the way, truth doesn't necessarily always mean 100% transparency. I get this question a lot. Sometimes there are things that you cannot be transparent about, but you do not need to lie about those things in order to be truthful. You can simply say, hey, that's not mine to share. Or, hey, I don't feel comfortable sharing that information right now. Or, hey, I'm still working through how I feel about this. I don't know yet. Give me some space and let me figure it out. Making sure that you're not lying to yourself or lying to others. And then finally, step 9 is continuous self-improvement trumps all. I love this graph. So if 0.01 to the 365th power is equal to 37.8. Yep, we love math. I love math. I'm an investor, right? But 0.99 to the 365th power is actually 0.03. So take that a different way. If you make little, minute 0.01 improvements every single day in your life, you will multiply your improvement by 37.8 times. But if you let yourself slide a little bit every day, if you don't work on yourself, or you make excuses for yourself, or you lie to yourself or to your others, and if you do that just a little bit every single day, you very, very quickly dwindle down to nothing. Working on yourself, working on your relationship with your co-founders, working on your company a little bit every day is how you get to excellence. Some suggestions on how to do that is simply hire a coach or a facilitator. This is not easy stuff to do on your own. By the way, you spend all this money on your marketing and you spend all this money on your engineering talent. How much money do you spend on yourself and on your relationship with your co-founder? Coaches and facilitators are surprisingly affordable in the hundreds of dollars an hour. You don't need them every single day. You work with them once or twice a month. This is stuff that helps you and can help not only help you as an individual, but help your relationship with your co-founder. Develop a rhythm of check-ins. Interestingly, I do this with my husband once a month. We have what we call life breakfasts, which are modeled after Brad Feld's life dinners. Brad Feld and his wife, Amy, once a month, they have their life dinner where they sit down and they check in on how they're doing, not only in life, but in their marriage. My husband and I decided that dinners were too exhausting for us because we have small children at home. So we did life breakfasts. But once a month we sit down, we go, how are you doing? Like, how are we doing? How do you feel about our marriage? How do you feel about the life that you're leading? And we talk about those. And that rhythm of check-ins gives us a check-in point before those conversations ever become elephants. So we can work on them. And you will use tools like I list here, red, yellow, green. This red, yellow, green comes from Jerry Colonna, who is one of the founders of Reboot, which is a CEO coach platform here in town. And red, yellow, green is a simple tool that allows you to communicate to the other person how you're doing, right? So when your co-founder asks you, how are you doing? And you say, actually, to be honest, I'm doing pretty red. My kids I'm homeschooling my kids right now because they're not in school and it's chaotic and I don't feel like I'm getting anything done. And, I feel like I'm behind at work all the time. Or, hey, I feel really great about how things are going. Using tools, words that are tools, help you develop a language that allows you to communicate with others. And some of those books that I shared earlier will give you some more tools that can help you work. And then lastly, just continually work on yourself, as I mentioned. Do a little bit every single day, a little bit once a week, a little bit with your co-founder once a week or once a month, whatever your rhythm of check-ins is, whatever things that you want to work on, we're going to be individual and unique to you, but this is not an area to ignore. All right, I just threw a lot of information at you, but we are going to do a little exercise. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Actually, let me stop my screen share so I can see your lovely faces. Give me a second. Okay. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to draw a graph. I want you to draw a graph of how you have been performing over the last 3 months. Your graph can, just like, is it up and to the right? Are you doing better and better over the last 3 months? Are you doing worse and worse and COVID realities are getting you down? Are you doing flat? Just draw a graph over your performance over the last 3 months. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Maybe you have to scramble and find paper. Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate the compliment. Okay, hopefully it's not a hard exercise. Just draw a graph of your performance over the last 3 months. Now here's what I would like for you to do. On that same graph, I would like for you to draw your co-founder's performance over the last 3 months. Chart it out. Your perspective of their performance. And by the way, if you're not a founder yet and you don't have a co-founder, it's fine. You put your spouse on here, put whoever it is that you're working closely with, your co-founder. But I want you to map it on the same graph. I'll give you a couple minutes, 1 minute to do that. It's not hard. Okay, assuming that you've done that, how do your graphs look? Are they charting the same way? Are they charting opposite ways? By the way, there is nothing wrong with your graph charting down. And there's nothing wrong with your co-founder's graph charting down. What's wrong is that you probably haven't talked about it. You probably haven't talked or said what's going on for you, or checked in with your co-founder and said, hey, how you doing? Feels to me like you've been struggling the last few months. How are you? Right? You probably just haven't talked about it. So my point in showing you the graph or giving the graph exercise is to give you yet another tool to help you identify when you should be talking about issues before they become elements or before they become elephants. Just a simple conversation on how you doing. All right, that is all I have for content. I'm Nicole, again, the Chief Investment Strategy Officer at Techstars, and I can take questions or concerns or observations. I'm happy to field your questions. I can also make this deck available because there are a lot of tools that I've listed in there. Actually, at every single stage, I tried to give you guys some tools to help you work through those things. The knowing yourself and knowing your co-founder stuff being the hardest. It's, again, knowing yourself and knowing your co-founder is a life's work. It takes a lifetime to come up with these things. But starting it is exactly what that continuous improvement is. Yes, Amani, I will share. I have a blog post that I need to write about all of this, which I have never done before. I usually work on this stuff individually with the founders that I work with inside of Techstars. And so I haven't had to do it publicly too often, but I plan on writing a blog post about it too, so you guys can have it. So just, does anybody have any questions or concerns? Does anybody want to share what was on their graph? You don't have to if you don't want to, because these can be very private conversations. So Stephen says, I presented a bunch of tools. What is the process I use to initiate this? This is the process right here. We say, hey, you got a 65% chance of failure because you two are going to not get along at some point. Let's solve that. Well, do you want to solve that? And if you do want to solve that, here's what we do. And we just start going through those steps that I mentioned. Let's get the legal docs in order. Let's figure out how well you know yourself. Here's some tools that you can use, like the Enneagram and the Strengths Finder and the DISC profile. Figure out what your values are. Have you gone through the why exercise? If not, go through it, right? I literally just walk through all of the stuff that I walked through in this deck. Is there a way to continue the egalitarian model? Can there be a checks and balances put in place? So that's a good question. I will tell you that I think every company matures and evolves a little bit differently, but as a company gets to a certain size, people cannot be in the room at the same time always. And to try to force that slows people down. So inside of Techstars, we're 300 people now. And to get anybody on the leadership team together, if you want to try to get 3 or more people on the leadership team together at the same time, it's often a month out. Can you really wait a month to make decisions that need to be made fast and furious? Probably not. So as a company scales, it absolutely needs to move from an egalitarian process to a hierarchical process. However, if you have gone through the exercise of finding your why, if you have gone through the exercise of stating your values, if you have gone through the exercise of figuring out how you live your why and the what that you do behind it, then when everybody is in those rooms in separate times and separate places, the decisions that are made are more closely aligned with what your why is and what the values of the company are. And so that's why it's so important to try to do those exercises early rather than waiting, because while you can't be egalitarian all the way through it, you just can't, it's physically impossible to get the people together at the speed that you need to get to in order to make the decisions. You can trust that the decisions are being made in the right way because they have the right framework to think about it. By the way, it's not just at the leadership level, it's all the way through the company. So once the whole company understands what the why is and the how you accomplish the why, and then the what underneath it, and looking at the lens of all of these decisions through the values of the founders and of the company, then you can know that even at the like 4th and 5th and 6th layer inside of the business, they're making decisions because you've given them a framework for how to make them. It says, my current boss is my co-founder, and I think we struggle with the relationship change now that I'm the CEO of our startup. He's older as well, and I think we fundamentally clash in how exactly to build a B2B tech startup. He's old school with old school fundamentals, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Have any advice to manage this? I would ask you if you've talked to him about it, that simply. I would just say, or it is a him. Yes, it is a him. Good. I would just say, hey, the story that I have in my head is that because I'm now the CEO, you are struggling to let go to the decision-making process. Do you feel that way? And if not, I feel that way. So let's talk about it, right? And I think just having the conversation at an early stage before it becomes a big issue inside of the company is important. Also, maybe understanding if he's feeling the need to interject all the time, there could be a couple reasons for that. It could be one, because he's having a hard time letting go. So we talked earlier about your shadow, right? And significance is a big thing for entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs want to get into the role of want to be CEO because they value significance above all else. And so if you've got somebody that's relinquishing a CEO job they're going to have issues with their own significance, and they're going to try to hold on to that as much as possible. But that might not be the only thing going on. He might not trust you yet. And so if he doesn't trust you yet, that's a conversation. He might think, hey, you're making bad decisions, or hey, I don't trust the way that you're thinking about this yet. And if that's true, don't take that as an insult, but rather take it as an opportunity to figure out why he doesn't. What decisions have you made that he has questioned? And maybe if that's true, you don't have yet the framework that he feels comfortable with in order to make the right decisions. You also might need to pull him along a little bit. Hey, stuff has changed. And so the framework that you were using to make decisions doesn't apply to us anymore. And here's why. And so you might need to share that with him. So I guess my point is just having an early conversation with him, a very candid conversation with him about about what you think is going on. I find that articulating it as the story that's in my head can be very impactful, because you're not accusing him of doing it. You're telling him what the thought processes are in your head. But anyway, talking about that stuff early. Oh, you guys are so many questions. It's great. Okay. If I could do one more thing to be more successful in your week, what would you personally be doing? And what would you be doing less? And what would you get help with? I think this is a personal question for me, but I'm happy to answer it. I would write more. I don't write enough. And I think that part of my writing is not as much about communicating out to others as it is about helping get clarity for myself around what's going on in my head. Sometimes the simple act of writing something down makes you go, oh, wow, well, that's really stupid now that I articulate it. But sometimes just the act of writing helps get clarity about how you feel or how you think about something, and helps you articulate it in a good way. So I would write more. The thing I would do less of is email. I hate email. I really, really hate email. But unfortunately, I think that's the reality of our world today. So that's probably the thing that I would always get help on is just getting through my email day. I think, does anyone else have any questions? Ask away. I love your questions. I love it when they're hard. Ask me hard questions. So maybe on that, I will tell you, I do this talk with the Techstars founders a lot. And usually what happens is when I give the talk, everybody walks away from the meeting going, oh, this sucks. Because it's not easy stuff to talk about, and because they realize usually that they've been neglecting it. I feel like that's probably happening here too. But know that it's okay. Remember, the very first step that I talked to you about is understanding your odds. And when you start to face the stuff that's difficult and the stuff that's hard, you are increasing your odds that those things won't happen to you. And so it's okay that this is hard, and it's okay that this is difficult, and it's okay that it's uncomfortable and awkward, and especially those people that don't like to talk about their feelings. But guess what? Your feelings are the things that are going to break up your company. And so learning how to talk about them in a constructive and non-threatening way is sort of key. All right. Unless there are other questions, I don't have any more. You're welcome, Becky. Oh, wait, there are more questions. I didn't scroll down. Okay, what is the kindest thing someone has done for you professionally? Oh, believed in me, stood up for me, gave me a chance to succeed, but also gave me a chance to fail on my own, right? And then was there for me when I did fail. Those are probably the kindest things that anyone has done for me professionally. And those are things that I try to do for others. I think we are all capable of an incredible amount, and we only know it when we are given the chance to succeed or fail. You don't know your limitations until you failed. What's the one trait that stands out for you in your favorite versus most successful founders, and what stands out as the least favorite versus least successful? The most, like, I've been talking a lot about this recently, but curiosity for me is one of the most successful traits, I think, because curiosity is not just outwardly focused. They get curious about what's the best way of doing product development, or what's the best way of running an engineering team, or what's the best way to be a CEO. They're also curious about themselves, right? What limitations do I have? How do I not correct those limitations, but how do I build scaffolding around myself to help make sure that that we can succeed through those limitations, right? People that are curious, because they don't become attached to their own opinions, and they don't become attached to their own ego. They actually want to seek what's right rather than winning, if that makes sense. Because if you're just focused on yourself and I just need to win, especially in arguments, a lot of times in arguments, people get attached to winning. I got to win the argument. You get angry and you start yelling back, and pretty soon you don't even know what you're yelling about. But rather getting curious, like, why are we angry? Why are we yelling? Like, what's the goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? And it's okay if I'm wrong or if I don't win. What we're trying to get to is the right thing, right? So I think curiosity for me is a big one. And how do you know when a change is necessary? You know, it varies. It varies from person to person and from company to company. It's why I encourage you to have the conversation with yourself and with your co-founder around, how will you know? What are the metrics that you need to be in place? Are they just growth metrics? Maybe there's a happiness metric in there. Maybe it's a, like, I'm not feeling fulfilled anymore, but my ego is so attached to this role or this title or this company. Maybe it's a skill set thing, right? Like, hey, I'm looking at where we need to go, and I'm realizing that I don't have the skills to get there. And as I think about those skills, I'm not excited about dominating them, right? What do you need in order for you to realize that it's time to make a change? As an investor, it's often time when the company reaches a plateau and it has been struggling through the plateau for quite some time. If people are constantly leaving and the turnover at the company is high, or the company has stopped growing, usually what that means is that somewhere at the executive level, the company no longer has the tools or the culture or the resources that it needs in order to break through that ceiling. But it's, you know, as an investor, especially being a board member, it's really hard to know the cause of those things. And so that's why I'm encouraging you to have the conversation with yourself and with your co-founder around when that time will be. And then know that as a co-founder, it can be very difficult to step out of your role or step aside. But it's often the best thing for you. You will often end up being much, much happier, or being much, much more, you're successful because the next person has come in to bring it to the next level. Would you suggest keeping personal and professional relationships separate? Example, if you're friends with your co-founder first, how do you draw the line to make sure feelings stay out of it? I don't think you can keep feelings out of it. I don't agree with that. I think you're one person and only one person. And you bring your feelings about every relationship and about everything that you're doing into your work. And so I think what you do is build tools and scaffolding to help you talk about the hard stuff, right? And in order to have the hard conversations if stuff isn't working anymore. By the way, keeping a friend in a role that is damaging the company is damaging them too. It's damaging them as a person, and it's damaging every employee that's in the company, and it's damaging all of the shareholders. The kindest thing you can do for them is have those conversations, right? And so I love working with friends. I think working with friends is great. It does make it harder to have those conversations, but hey, it should also make it easier, right? So a lot of those tools that I gave you before, the books, Crucial Conversations, Difficult Conversations, Radical Candor, these are all books that will help you have very honest conversations with your friend as a co-founder. And by the way, like I said earlier, they will also help you with your significant other, with your children, with your parents. These are all good skills to build. I just scrolled down. I know there are no more questions. Oh, wait, no, sorry. There's questions in the panelists. What do you feel is your timing point for making your mission a reality? Oh, tipping point. What do you feel is your tipping point for making your mission a reality? That is a meaty question. I think the beginning. I mean, I had this, so yesterday I was talking to some founders that were going through one of a Techstars program that's not in this country, that's in another country. And they were really struggling with their product. They were getting a ton of feedback from mentors that they should be pivoting the product to doing this other thing. And they were just really struggling with this feedback because it took them really a far way away from why they started the business in the first place. They started the business to increase human connection. And they thought about it as a very like an intimate level. And the feedback that they were getting from mentors is there's no market for that. You should create a team facilitation tool, like getting teams to work together more efficiently and connect in that way. And that just felt so far away from their passion to them that they were really struggling with the product and how to like build the product and how to position the product because they didn't love it, right? I think the beginning is the time to make your mission a reality. I think that you always create with the end, you always begin with the end in mind. So start with what you want to accomplish. Start with a clear picture in your head of what that looks like. Start with the why you're building it and the how you will build it, and then the what. And then once you have a clear picture of that, then you can work backwards and figure out, okay, where are we today? And what are the steps that we need to get there? By the way, your steps are going to be wrong. Your steps are totally going to be wrong, but it doesn't matter because you know the why and you know the how. And like a airplane pilot that's correcting their flight, they're going to continually correct as they fly to get to their final destination. You will do that too. But because you always have that clear picture in your mind of where you're going to end up, you will stay on the right path versus waking up one day going, what the hell am I doing with myself and my life? So I think at the beginning, start now, do that today. And then in 10 years, you will wake up and be so proud and fulfilled of what you have accomplished because you accomplished what you set out to accomplish rather than getting pulled in all these crazy directions that may or may not make sense for you. Let's see. Would you suggest keeping personal and professional relationships separate? Example, oh, I answered that one already. Answered that one. All right, you guys had lots of good questions. I love it. I don't think we have any more. Oh, we do. How do you overcome differences in opinion with your co-founder when it comes to the vision of the company? This is a good one. If you go through the why, and you go through the how, and you go through the what, and you do that as an individual, and then you do that also as a company, and you are not on the same page with your co-founder, then you should leave. It is that simple. You're not aligned, and you're not aligned on the most fundamental foundational element. You will spend every single day in conflict with them because you have different visions of what it should be, right? And I would rather you leave now than leave in 5 years after having spent 5 years of your life banging your head against a wall. And by the way, I'm not saying that you're right about your vision, and I'm not saying that your co-founder is right. It doesn't actually matter who's right. Really doesn't in terms of the big market opportunity. What matters is what your vision is. And so you just leave. But be methodical about going through those exercises, right? And when you do that, you might find that you're not that far off. You might find that you are aligned on the how and you're aligned on the why and the how, but you're not aligned on the what. And if you're not aligned on the what, you could talk about that. You could talk about, well, maybe if the big vision is this, but you might find that where you're really differing is just what the first steps are, the first steps of the business are. Still align on the why. Okay, I said I refer to Brene Brown often, who I also adore. Who else is an inspiration to you and why? I just went through this, I binged listened to all Brene Brown's books recently. But it's interesting because a lot of the stuff I was doing prior to that. And so one of the reasons that I kind of love Brene Brown is she sort of articulated a lot of stuff that she articulated stuff in words and in research that I had experienced in working with founders. And she just sort of gave me tools like the braving inventory was awesome because I can sit down and when you're going through a conflict with your co-founder, you sit down with the braving inventory and ask yourself those questions. How many of these things am I doing? Right? How many of these things am I truly doing? And you find that you're probably only doing 1 or 2 of them and the rest of them you're not doing. You're like, okay, well, there's the conflict, right? I'm being the jerk here, not them. Let me start with me. So anyway, Brene Brown is awesome. I actually really like Stephen Covey. If you haven't read his book, The 7, oh my God, I can't remember the name of the book. The 7 steps to the most successful people or something like that. Yes, thank you. Traits of highly effective people. I read that book when I was in college and it was like one of those things I had to do for a business class. And I kind of like, he's Stephen Covey's a business guy. I recently reread it and I forgot how good it was. And so he's got a lot of really interesting wisdom in his book. Like the whole book is full of wisdom. So if you haven't read that book or you haven't read it recently, I highly recommend that you pick it up again. It's just full of how to live a fulfilling life, right? I also have done, in a previous life, I had listened to a lot of Tony Robbins stuff. And Tony Robbins kind of makes me throw up a little bit. He's very misogynistic and he's very old school and he talks about masculinity all the time and testosterone and he's like that kind of guy. But he's got a lot of wisdom in what he says. And so if you can get through the crap, you can actually learn a lot about yourself. And I think sometimes in life, we have to sort of sort through the junk to get to the good stuff. And he's got a lot of good stuff in there. There's a reason he got to where he is. You just have to sort of get through a little bit of his personality. And if you love him, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you or anything like that. It's just not my style, but he's got some good content. We, I think, are out of time. It's 11:59. So my name is Nicole. You can reach me at nicole@techstars.com. Do not hesitate to email. I literally respond to 100% of emails. It might take me a while, but I will get to your email. You can follow me on my blog, nearlynicole.com. And I'm happy to answer your questions and be supportive of you guys as you go through your journeys. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much, Nicole. Great session. We appreciate it. The video for this session will be on YouTube right now on the Denver Startup Week channel. And we can't wait to see you at the rest of Denver Startup Week today and tomorrow. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Denver Startup Week.